as our first presenter on the option of agriculture. My friend John Swann is going to tell us a little bit about why he is qualified to speak on the subject. He's going to talk about relocalizing the food supply. John Swann.
I'm not sure that I'm entirely qualified to speak, but I will anyway. So I've been involved in local food in this Western North Carolina really since the 70s. And when I first came to North Carolina in 1974 and fell in love with these mountains, and have been involved with food in one aspect or another ever since then. First with the food co-ops in the mid and late 70s. And then I got into the manufacturing side of things back in the mid-'80s. I manufactured tofu, of all things, back in the '80s in Boone, a little before its time, and moved it down here to the Asheville area in 1992. I'm sorry, 1990, and was crushed by competition in 1992. In the years prior to now, about maybe 10 years ago, I got involved with the ASAP, the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. Charlie Jackson, their executive director, actually used to cook tofu for me back in the '80s. He went on to get his master's degree and then came back and got into ASAP. And then we later then crossed paths. And I've been on the board at ASAP for the last 10 years. I'm currently vice president. And really proud of what ASAP has done with local food in this area. This area is a model for local food development nationally. And ASAP is now consulting around the region, around the Southeast, also even on a national scale up in D.C. occasionally, for local food development. And I probably am preaching to the choir here about ASAP, but the Farmers Market, Tailgate Market Association, the City Market, the Appalachian Grown Certified Program, the Business of Farming Conference we have every year right here, every spring, which is a very successful thing to help local farmers, not with farming, but with how do you run a farm business. So the bookkeeping and the marketing and the payroll and personnel management and all those sorts of things, as well as linking up producers with the stores, with Katua, Green Life, Earth Fare, Whole Foods, all of them come and we link up buyers with producers. One of the things I love about what I do is both with Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, but also with Blue Ridge Food Ventures, which I'm also involved with, is helping local entrepreneurs, people that want to produce food, with getting their businesses going, identifying their niches, helping develop their products, bringing them to market, and giving them a place to actually sell their products, where most stores will say, well, I don't know, you're awful small, you've only got a couple of items, who's your distributor? You don't have a distributor? Nah, we're not going to mess with it. And so we've had the opportunity to bring a bunch of products that you now see all around, Bucci, kombucha, Lusty Monk mustard, Jack's Nut Butters, and Lodger's Jam. I can go on and on. We've helped not only consult with those companies, but also bring the products onto the shelf and get them established and help them get their position going, get their sales going. It's that first $250,000 a year in sales. That's the hardest thing to do, and that's where our niche is, to help develop that. I mentioned Blue Ridge Food Ventures. I'm on their advisory board and have been very active in consulting with Blue Ridge Food Ventures and the companies that have come out of that operation. If you don't know that, it's a food incubator in the old Inca BASF plant that they gave to the state for tax write-offs, I guess, and then the state basically gave it to Advantage West and AB Tech, and they have a food incubator out there. It's an 11,000 square foot facility with a whole bunch of equipment, packing equipment, cooking equipment, freezing, drying, you name it. And it enables a small producer to produce a product without having to have the startup costs that's involved with setting up an operation. So even the simplest food operation to be food grade and inspected, you're talking $250,000, $300,000, $400,000. And that's a big barrier to a lot of people. So this organization has enabled people to come in, they rent it by the hour, and basically produce on a contract kind of a basis. And now they're starting to do private packing for other companies that aren't entrepreneurs but who need a packer. So they've kind of branched out and they're now standing on their own. They've kind of been weaned off of AB Tech due to state funding cuts. And so I'm involved with that organization as well. Excuse me. So my whole life for the last 30 years has been around food. It's been around the market of food, marketing of food in this area. And my bias is towards local production. I think the dominant paradigm in the United States right now for food is totally supported by agricultural subsidies and cheap fuel. Those are the two big components. If there were not the agricultural subsidies, we would be in a whole different picture right now with our food systems, and it's not sustainable. The only reason that our food system works right now is the whole thing runs on petroleum, either on chemical fertilizers, oil-derived, or on fuel. And like it or not, we're going to run up in the next few years, next 100 years certainly, into the limits of that system, of that capacity. And we've got to come up with a more sustainable model if we're going to be successful as a species on the planet. And to me, decentralization is a huge part of not only the food model, but the energy model as well. We should have distributed energy sources throughout solar, wind, hydro, whatever we can do on a distributed basis. To decentralize makes us less vulnerable to centralized disruption, and lowers the cost because it spreads it out over. We don't have $100 billion nuclear plants. We may have a $100,000 solar plant, much easier to capitalize and much less risky. So on an energy level, I think it makes sense, and on a food level, it makes sense. The average food product travels some 1,500 or 2,000 miles to get to your table. I have read a thing recently about a burrito, or I'm sorry, burrito in California. A student group was doing a study on food miles, and they took an average burrito off of a food truck, and they talked to the owner and found out where all the products were coming from, and they added up all the miles that all of the products came from, all the way down to the salt and the tortillas and the tomatoes and everything, the beans, everything. 75,000 miles were in that tortilla, in that burrito. 75,000 miles. That's crazy. That is crazy. And I know we have local beef producers, one of whom is sitting here in the room, John Ager with Hickory Nut Gap, a wonderful family farm. And I know, because I know the farm well, and I know Jamie, his son, who's running it, that they're having to compete with beef from New Zealand and Argentina. And the buyers will say, why would we buy your beef? We can get it from Argentina or from New Zealand for less. And it's like, that makes no sense. I don't care if it costs less. It's an artificial model, and it's only propped up by cheap fuel. So as far as how that fits into this symposium, I would be delighted if the Coggins farm were to be a production farm. I think that would be the highest and best use of that property. I have, fortunately, having known Ron for many years, I've been out there many times. It is a lovely piece of property. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of land, and has a lot of very, very usable and very accessible farmland, which is not entirely typical of land around here. So I'd love it if that happened. Now, realizing I'm a businessman also, and I also have my own farm up in Yancey County. As an aside, we, up until 3 years ago, were the southernmost producer of maple syrup in the United States on a commercial basis. The last 2 winters before this one, it was so warm that I won't go into the details of it, but maple trees have to have a certain environmental set of conditions through the winter and into the spring in order to produce syrup. And those conditions were not met for the last 2 years prior to this one. And we didn't think they were going to be met until the first of the year, this year, because, again, it was warm as a dickens going in through Christmas until the first of the year. Then the bottom dropped out, of course, and it was 0 degrees, and we actually had a real winter. We had a real winter. So anyway, so I've been on the production side as well, and I would love it if to see more development of local food production in this area. That's a very core part of why we're in business and what we're doing, and we will do everything we can to support anybody that's producing local food, assuming that they are natural. It doesn't have to be organic necessarily. We prefer the word bona fide over certified. It's difficult for a lot of local producers to go certified because of the cost and time involved. But I think for our customer, which is kind of what I call the true blue foodie, the people who really care about where their food comes from and want to know, it's more important for them to know where it comes from, who's the farmer, do they have integrity, are they doing the right thing, than it is to be certified organic. And so local trumps organic in our world. Now, having said that, if we can buy local organic, that's even better. But there's not a lot of local organic production here. It's not. We don't have any big scale farms, and unless you are fairly big, it's expensive to do organic certification. So, long and short of it is, I think that love it if that farm were to be, the Coggins farm were to be a local food production center. But certainly, I think that if there is a way for an agricultural component to be added into the mix there in the development of that farm, I think that would be a lovely thing, and we would certainly wholeheartedly support it. So I appreciate everyone coming out for this symposium. I think this discussion and this dialogue is worth happening regardless of the Coggins farm, regardless of any particular incident. We need to look at land use planning, especially here in the mountains, because we don't have a lot of land here. We have a lot of land, but we don't have a lot of usable land. And I've seen several lovely farms go down to development and that are now paved and have houses. And it's just a shame because we need to have the local supply of food. I think it's important. And it's an opportunity for us to have economic development in a way that benefits the greater society and not a developer or not a few homeowners, basically. In the study of biology, we have a unique environmental and topographical set of parameters in the southern Appalachian Mountains, and the Cotulla bioregion is almost the exact outline, if you look at it on a map, of what we call local, which is the ASAP definition of local. There's a specific set of counties. People always ask, what do you call local? Well, we call local this, that, and that in an exact line. It isn't a squishy thing that, well, Statesville's local or Charlotte or Wilmington or whatever. I talked to one local store at a tailgate market thing one day and asked what they considered local, and she said, anywhere you can drive from Asheville in a day. And I said, I can get to Orlando in a day. I can get to New York City in a day. You call that local? And she said, that's what they told me. So I said, okay, well, that explains your definition of local. Ours is very specific to the ASAP region, which is the Cotulla bioregion. What appealed to me about it is the Indian philosophy of the sense of place and the sense of place we come from, and respect to the concept that they had of locality, of a sense of place, a sense of identity with your surroundings. And I think that we've lost that to a large degree as a culture. We've become so homogenized, we've become so worldly, if you will. I got the whole world on my PDA right here. I can throw up and instantly be across the world, and that's kind of cool, but on the other hand, we've lost our roots, and so part of it is kind of identifying, tapping back into that. Most consumers in the United States, the vast majority, have no idea where their food comes from, and they don't care. They just want cheap food. But just like organic, there's a lot of organic out there that really is factory farms, and they've diluted the concept. And so the same thing is kind of happening with local. It's a lot earlier in the development of that marketing concept. But what is local? Who's behind it? Why are they doing it? Those are questions that I hope consumers ask. I don't think many do. There's only one or two cities in the country of this size, Santa Fe and Madison come to mind, that have this kind of propensity for the natural foods and local foods that we have here. So we're blessed to be in a place not only that has that awareness and consciousness of food issues, but also has a reasonable climate. It's not as nice as Southern California, but we still produce quite a bit of small farm food here, and so we're blessed to have an environment and a consciousness here that supports that, and we're very happy about that. All right, well, thank you. I've just had my plug pulled by Ian, and I appreciate you all coming out. Thanks to Ian for doing this. All right, thank you, Ian.